Good evening, folks, or good morning. It's about 1:30 in the morning, and welcome to my new podcast and YouTube channel called Destination Life. This video here, in this podcast, I'm going to explain to y'all why I decided to start this channel and podcast called Destination Life. It's about my how I ended up being diagnosed with MS, how I came to take those off, or I'll end up talking at a different volume. My when I got the MS, how I ended up with getting diagnosed and that kind of thing. And it's a long story. It started when I was in my 20s. That's about as far back as I can pinpoint when I had the beginning symptoms of multiple sclerosis, which I did not know that I had. And the reason I didn't know I had was because I broke my neck wrestling in high school. And I had developed lordosis over time, which is a condition where you suffer an injury, like if you get rear-ended in a car, or for me, breaking or fracturing my neck. I didn't actually completely break it, or I'd be dead. I fractured C1, 2, and 3 in my, up here just below your skull. That's the 3 that kill you instantly if they're completely fractured, usually anyway. And once you have that kind of an injury, the very top where your skull meets your spine, it's called your atlas. If your atlas gets knocked out of alignment, and when it gets knocked out of alignment, all the vertebrae in your neck begin to shift to try and match up with your atlas. And what happens is your neck is supposed to curve forward, and mine actually curves slightly backwards. And when that happens, you start getting degenerative disc disease. It starts to wear away at the myelin sheath around your spine, and you start to get, symptoms like numbness and tingling. And like me, I used to sketch and draw very well, and after a while I couldn't. I used to type, I don't know, it's 100 or 200 words a minute. I forget what it was. I typed as fast as I could talk, and now I'm lucky to be able to do 10 words a minute. I was an IT professional for since 1989, so typing was pretty crucial to my job. So anyway, the first signs that I had that I noticed, which now I know were MS, but back then I didn't, were I was in the Army, and I was being transferred to South Korea, and I was taking my second wife from Fort Hood, Texas, to Jonesboro, Arkansas, to live with her mom while I was in Korea. And the ride, I forget how long it was. It's probably 6-8 hours. It was something like that. I mean, it's a long drive. When I got there, my entire body had this weird vibrating, tingling feeling. And I'd never had that before, but I blew it off. I thought it was because I was tired from all the packing and stuff like that. But it hung in there for like half the day after we got there. And as it turns out, that's something called Lemaitre sign. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing this right. Lermite, yeah, it's pronounced Lermite sign, and generally, it's from when you tip your head down. If you feel like electricity running through your arms and legs and down your back, that's what it is. But for some reason, I just got it probably from sitting, in that driving position for so long. But it's the same. It's the same kind of electrical feeling. So I ignored that, went on to Korea. And then when I was in Korea, I noticed that I was having mood changes and that kind of thing. And I actually went to the psychiatrist in Korea because I was afraid I was actually getting ready to put in my warrant packet, go to warrant officer school and, make a career out of it, go 20, 30 years. But about halfway through, well, actually, it was towards the end of my tour in Korea, I started having strange mood swings. And I mean, some of them were aggressive, and I didn't know how to explain it, didn't know where it was coming from, but I knew that if I didn't get out of the Army, something was going to happen. So I put myself into psych and told him, you got to put me out because I'm just afraid that something's going to happen. And I'd rather get out before, I hurt somebody or ruin my career or whatever. And they said no. They said, we don't do that anymore. The old Section 8 thing, if you ever watch MASH. They said, oh, we don't do that anymore. Well, I found out since that's not true, that they do. He just didn't want to for some reason. But they moved me from one medication to another. None of them did anything for me. And then finally, he diagnosed me with something called temporal lobe epilepsy and put me on a whole bunch. I was taking 16 milligrams of Klonopin a day. And usually they diagnose 2 or 4 milligrams a day, so I was basically like a walking zombie. And, I ended up getting court-martialed because I beat a bunch of MPs up. And I won't get it. Maybe I'll tell that story in a later video if for some reason it becomes appropriate. But so I got out. I ended up becoming the CTO of a national internet company. And I was driving out to a new location we were setting up in Ocala, Florida. And it was a long drive. It was like 6 hours. And I was driving the company van with a bunch of ATM network switches and stuff in the back of the van and, that kind of thing. And I noticed when I was driving, I was getting this burning pain between my shoulder blades, and I was starting to get that vibrating electrical feeling in me again, like I got when I drove my wife to her mom's. And I had to go back and forth several times over a week. And it was getting pretty intense and pronounced. And I went to a doctor, and they had no idea. They thought I had muscle tension and, things like that. So they misdiagnosed me and all that kind of stuff. Well, I started looking into it myself, and I ran across something talked about Lemaitre sign being a symptom of MS. So I thought, well, sounds like MS, and I looked into it. And back then they were saying any male who develops MS in his 30s, which I was, is usually dead within 10 years because it's progressive MS. So I got onto, I think it was ask.com, where you can ask a doctor questions. And I asked him, and he said the odds of me having MS are slim to none, and asked me if I ever had a neck injury. And I said, well, I fractured my neck in high school. And he said, that's probably what it is. It's calcifying and putting pressure on your spine and probably wearing away at the myelin sheath, etc., and so on. So I started trying to take care of my spine. I looked into how to, different supplements that you can take and that kind of thing that will help with the health of your spine and so forth. So I continued to have, numbness. I started noticing that I was, my hands, I wasn't able to write like I used to, that it was getting harder for me to hold like small screws, that kind of thing. And I just figured this was just the progression of whatever, this neck injury, what was going on with it. By 2005, 2006, I could still handle screws, but it was just getting very difficult. I couldn't draw anymore. using a mouse, like for me to just put the mouse on, say, the little X up in the corner of the window to close out a window, it probably takes me 30 seconds to a minute of just trying to get the mouse to land on the X because my hands twitch and shake and that kind of thing. And for an IT professional, that's a bit of a problem. So, then more time goes by. I've been to the doctors. I've been to the emergency room several times. One time I had hypertensive crisis where my blood pressure, I think, was like 180 over 140 or something like that. I was like, the guy thought I was going to die. I was at a chiropractor, and he sent me to the hospital. I went there, and the doctors checked me. Everything was fine. They thought that I guess they get people in there who cry wolf all the time, and so they were jumping on me about wasting their time in the emergency room and stuff like that. So, I blew it off. Now, mind you, since I was a teenager, since I've been an adult, in my adult life, I've only been to the doctor a handful of times. I can probably count up until, the MS thing, the diagnosis, which I'm about to get to. I could probably count on one hand how many times I've gone to the doctor, to include an emergency room and all that. Well, except in the Army, because they make you go for the slightest little things. But, other than the Army, I rarely go to the doctor. So it wasn't like I was some kind of hypochondriac and I was, crying wolf and trying to get attention, whatever the heck it is they think I was trying to do. One guy was having this massive migraine hit me. And me and my sister had been out, we went out drinking and stuff together. And I all of a sudden got this massive migraine, made me sick. I couldn't even open my eyes because the light was just killing me. And I had her take me to the emergency room. That's how bad it was. And I went in there, and the guy asked me if I had ever suffered from depression. I was like, what the hell does that have to do with a migraine, So I got mad at him, and I just said, screw this. I'm done with it. I'm not dealing with this kind of crap, and I left. And the migraine had kind of eased up by that time, which, it's like you take your car to the shop, and the mechanic, I don't see what you're talking about, kind of thing. That's basically what happened. So, in a way, I kind of don't blame the doctor, but in a way I do, because he should take his job a little more seriously and take care of people, because that was a symptom of MS. And even if, like he said, have you ever suffered from depression? That's a symptom of MS too, So, then more years go by, and I've, I kind of, when I was in the Army, I lifted weights. I ran 10 mile. I could run 10. I didn't like to do it, but I ran 2 to 5 miles a day. And there were times when I'd run 10 miles, and lifted weights, and, inadvertently ate pretty good, I guess. But I had, low cholesterol, my blood pressure was on the low end. I was pretty healthy. Then when I got into IT, I was busy. I was always sitting at a computer. I gained a bunch of weight. And people would say, oh, you got to lose that weight. You got to lose that weight. And I said, well, I've got time to do that. I know how to do it, because when I was in the Army, I was in great shape. Well, it sneaks up on you. You don't realize it. And then the time goes by really fast. So when I hit my mid-40s, I started looking into getting back into shape, and realized when they said that it's not as easy as you get older, that's true. I noticed this is a lot harder than I thought. So I got real serious about it. Did a lot of research and that kind of thing. For years, I researched it. And then I got back into shape. I lost a bunch of weight, got back down to, I was actually in better shape than I was when I was in the, when I was in the Army, and when I got out of the Army, at least, And then I was working, I went from IT to working in a factory because I was interviewed by magazine. I was considered one of the best network engineers in the country there for a while. I'm not going to get into all that, but anyway, I was quite high up in the IT world as far as my position. I had probably the equivalent of a master's degree. in life experience, in networking and telecommunications, and I was a Linux developer for a while, that kind of stuff. So in a regular small town environment, I'm not going to find too many jobs. There's probably one company in a small town that has one position that would be at the level where I was, maybe. I actually got flown around. I got flown to St. Louis to interview with Edward Jones to become one of their network engineers. I got flown to Atlanta and put up in a hotel for 3 days to interview with Scientific Atlanta to become one of their engineers at their main campus location. So I was, and they actually found me to be overqualified, if that gives you an indication. So in order for me to work, I would have had to go to like Silicon Valley, and I didn't really have the inclination to do that because I was getting back with my ex-wife, my first wife. That's a long story. I won't get into details, but I did. And she lived in a little town in Indiana, well, actually Ohio. And so I ended up in Ohio. I started my own internet company, a wireless internet company. And I was the best internet company in 500 square miles until her ex, the guy she was married to between, he had political ties, and him and his family, once they figured out what my company was, they went on a destroy my company thing. And, they succeeded. They had a lot of connections and that kind of thing. So I said, well, that's it. I'm going to have to get a regular job, but nobody's going to hire me because of my experience. So I basically wiped my slate clean by I said, well, I'm going to go into a straight labor job. So I went to a plastic recycling plant and worked there. And I was working 12-hour shifts, so you don't sit down for the entire shift. And this isn't like, the plastics people throw away. This is like the wrappers that they put on, like your iced tea bottle and stuff. They come in huge rolls. And it's like, if you ever seen a video of like a newspaper company, when they do the newspaper, how it's just these big long lines and then they get cut down into it. That's kind of how they do their plastic. And that's what we did. When their rolls, when they had printed off a bunch and like there was a printing error or a perforation error, they would recycle the rolls. So we would get rolls that weighed anywhere from, just a couple of pounds, 5-10 pounds, all the way up to, I think the heaviest roll I had to deal with was about 2,700 pounds. So these, it was a lot of weight, a lot of stuff. And we would process about anywhere from 20 to 40,000 pounds of plastic per shift. So it was a pretty intense environment, and it was always in the summertime. I guess it got up around 100, 120 degrees in there. And we actually had one guy, his first job right out of high school, and he died. He got heat exhaustion in that, and he ended up dying. But I worked at this job, and they called me Beast Mode Pops. I was out working the 20-year-olds and that kind of thing. Now, mind you, the whole time I was doing this, I had multiple sclerosis, and I had had it since about 19, or when I told you about that first symptom, when I took my ex-wife to her mother's, that was 1991, if I remember right, around there. All right, now this is a picture. I'm going to show you a picture that I took of myself in the summer of 2016, just before I tore a bicep muscle, which I had to get surgery for. So this is me, literally, I believe, a week before I tore my bicep muscle. And then I had to stop working out and wait for the surgery, workers' comp. That took a while. I think it was 9 months it took before they even scheduled the surgery. Then when I had the surgery, they told me I had to stop taking all of my supplements that I was taking for bodybuilding and staying healthy and all this stuff. And I was on a ketogenic diet, and they didn't really like that. So I started eating normal, and all this kind of thing. So in this picture, I weighed 206 pounds, had a 34-inch waist. I had, I believe it was 18-inch biceps. I was pretty big dude. That's why they called me Beast Mode Pops at work. Okay, now, as you look at me, I am 60 pounds heavier. I've lost a lot of muscle, um, and I can barely walk. Back in November, after I had the bicep surgery, they told me to go off my supplements. I started, I eventually did go back to work about, I think it was 3 or 4 months after my surgery. And I noticed I wasn't able to make it through the shifts anymore. By the end of the shift, I was starting to have a hard time. After a couple of months, by the end of the shift, I noticed I was like stumbling like a drunk. And I didn't know what was going on. I thought, well, age is catching up to me. So I made arrangements. I was actually getting ready to move anyway. So I made arrangements to start driving for Uber and Lyft. I said, well, I'll check it out, see if it's any good. If I'm making enough money, then I'll just quit my job and just do this. I mean, why not? Just sitting in a car, driving people around the whole time rather than standing, and lifting, big rolls of plastic that weigh 50, 100 pounds. It's a no-brainer. Well, I actually did. I was able to almost make the same amount of money driving for Uber and Lyft as I did at the factory. So I quit. Then I was driving, and after I think it was 2 months of driving, I was working one night and I noticed that I was getting this weird feeling in my hamstring and my right leg. But I didn't think, I thought it was probably from sitting a lot, because I went from standing all the time to sitting all the time. So I just blew it off. And then after this all took place in about a 5-day span, I started getting the weird feeling in my calf or my hamstring. Then after about 2 days, I was getting tingling and a numb sensation in my hamstring. And then I noticed I was having trouble walking. I was starting to drag my foot. And then like the next day, all of a sudden I could barely get from my house to my car and my car to my house, so I was still driving people around. But then by the end of one night that I worked, I had to, go use the facilities at a McDonald's, and I could barely get in there. So the next day, I decided not to work, and I went down to the marathon station in the town I lived in. That was only maybe a half a mile up the street from my house, and my foot wasn't doing what it was supposed to. I tried to hit the brakes and my foot went under the brake, and I couldn't figure out what the hell happened. I had what was called drop foot. That my foot wasn't where I thought it was. I guess that's what they call it. That's what it was doing. So when I hit the brake, I take my foot off the gas and go to hit the brake. My foot would do that and just go right up underneath the brake pedal, and I blew right through I think it's a U.S. highway, but luckily nobody was coming. So I got back to the house. It was raining, and I think it was 28 or 30 degrees out. I had gone down to get some food. And now I had no food in the house because I was actually literally 1 week from moving to Florida to where my mom was, to help her and my sister move to Alabama. And then I was going to buy a motorhome and go traveling around the country. Well, that obviously didn't happen. I'm actually in Alabama right now in the same house with my mom and my sister. But anyway, I got back to the house after going to the marathon station, and I got out and fell. And the bags, sorry about that, folks. That probably blew your eardrums out. But, my bags went flying everywhere. Tried to get up. I fell like 5 times before I could get away from my car. And I ended up dragging myself to my front door because I couldn't get up. And it took me probably 20 minutes to drag myself across my lawn to my front door and get myself up the stairs. and in the house. And then I had to come back out, and I literally used, I had my garbage can next to the front door because I was moving. I was throwing stuff away. And I had to, it was one of those with the wheels. And I actually used it like a walker to walk back out and pick up the groceries that I had bought, that I bought in my wallet, and get them back to the house. And that probably took me another probably 15, 20 minutes to get out there and back. And we're only talking about maybe 5 or 10 yards from my door. It wasn't very far, you know. So I got back in the house, and I thought that maybe I got a pinched nerve. So I said, well, I'll take a day. I'll take, give it a couple of days. I got down on the floor and I tried to, work my back and my neck and, see if I could try and knock whatever. Because I also had an intense pain in my side at the same time that started a few days before, when I started getting that strange feeling in my hamstring. So the next morning, I couldn't walk at all. My right leg was completely non-responsive. I could feel everything. I mean, I didn't lose sensation in it at all, but it didn't do anything. If I tried to lift it, it just didn't move. If I tried to move my toes, they didn't move. If I tried to do this with my foot, it didn't move. And I was basically stuck on my floor. And then eventually I got my vacuum cleaner out, and I was using my vacuum cleaner as a crutch, as my right leg basically, and it was just dragging it along behind me. Of course, I fell so many times, and I had boxes and stuff everywhere, and at one point I fell on a bunch of glass and smashed it. And after a couple of days of that, I realized it wasn't getting any better. Not only that, but it seemed to be getting worse, because now I was getting a loss of sensation in my foot. It started in my like in my heel, like right in the center of my heel, and it started to spread. And I thought, well, so I called my father, who lives in Alabama. This is actually one of his properties that we live in, and asked him if he would be able to get up there, and he was, because he's retired. So he got in his truck and drove up there, and literally picked me up off the floor in my living room, and took me to the emergency room. And then within, I think, 10 minutes, the emergency room doctor said, "You have MS." I said, "That's not possible," because I had talked to that one doctor back in 1998, I think it was, who said it was slim to none chances. And she said, "Nope, I'm 99% positive you have MS." And they ended up giving me an MRI, and evidently my neck was riddled with lesions. I had some lesions in my brain, and the one that was causing me the problem at the time was a lesion. She said it was 3 vertebrae, so I'm assuming that's what's maybe 6 inches. I don't know how big a vertebrae is, but it sounds about right to me. Of my thoracic spine had a massive lesion on it. So they sent me straight into a hospital in Fort Wayne. This was actually in Ohio, but the nearest neurological hospital, well, there was 2 the same distance. One was in Lima and one was in Fort Wayne. And my ex-wife worked at in a medical. She was HR in a hospital, basically, and she had lived there her whole life, other than when we were together in Florida and stuff. And told me, go to Fort Wayne, So I did, and I got there, and I was there for a month and a half. And while I was there, I saw several neurologists. They told me to not get my hopes up. It's quite possible I'll never walk again. And that kind of good news you want to hear. And then at one point they said, all right, they put me on Solumedrol for, I think it was 5 days, 6 days, something like that. And at the end of that, they said, we're transferring you to a rehab center, or rehab facility, whatever, at one of their other hospitals that was a few miles away in the southern part of the city. And we're going to put you in an intense rehab program, because I was starting to get my ability to walk back, and I was using a walker. kinda. I wasn't doing very well with it, but I was, I was making progress. So they decided to put me in an intense rehab, inpatient rehab situation. Sent me down there. Well, down there, they ended up, someone changed something, because instead of putting me in an intense rehab, they put me in a nursing home. And when I found myself in a nursing home, my grandmother got put in a nursing home in Florida, and the nursing home wouldn't let her out. Evidently, there was some law or something. And when my mother put her in there, the paperwork she signed to admit her to the nursing home gave them power of attorney over my grandmother, and she never got out again. Well, she did, but it took a lawyer. And it took a lawyer and her insurance refusing to pay anymore is what it took. So when I was in the nursing home, I got freaked out. I said, I'm going to be here, and this is it. I'm never going to get out, So I called I ended up getting into a fight with the hospital administrator, and I said, who gave you the right to change my neurologist's orders to put me in rehab by putting me in a nursing home? And they moved me immediately. So I think they got a little nervous, because I told them I was going to call the local news and that kind of thing, because they did. They decided to just change it, And I ended up finally got to rehab, and I spent a couple of weeks there. Got out, got all the shit out of my house. Well, excuse my language there. Got all the stuff out of my house and went to Alabama. And that's where I am. And I've made my neurologist appointment, which is April 30th. I got out of the hospital like a week before Christmas, and they said immediately go to a neurologist. I don't know what neurologists think immediately is, because they set my appointment like 4 months away. I don't get what's with these guys. I mean, he knows I have MS, and he schedules me 4 months away. I know they're busy and stuff, but you would think there would be some kind of prioritization for people who could die between now and the time that their 4 month later appointment is, or become bedridden or whatever. There's no telling what could happen to me between now and then. So, misdiagnosis after misdiagnosis. The army doctor should have diagnosed me with MS, because that's what was causing my mood swings and stuff, because I was having a MS attack in my brain. The emergency room doctors I went to when I was having hypertensive crisis, and I had AFib at one point where my heart was jumping around. I thought I was having a heart attack. Well, I actually don't know if that's a MS thing, but in any case, the hypertensive thing, that was an MS related thing. I also had vertigo at the same time as the hypertensive. I had vertigo, hypertension, and there was something else. What was it? Oh, my handwriting. I went from being able to write to, like, when you write, you put your hand on the paper and you just move your hand like that, right? Well, when I had this hypertensive attack and I try to write my name, and I'm trying to write my name like that, my fingers would just go up and down. No matter what I did, that was the only direction my fingers would move. So, I went to the hospital and they said I had to sign the thing to go into the emergency thing. And I went to sign it, and I just made an up and down squiggle. And she said, I need your signature, sir. And I said, that is it. She said, that's a squiggle. I said, I'm sorry, but that's all I can muster for you right now. I was like, what, are you kidding me? That's why I'm here, And there's a lot of explicatives I could add in there to show you just how strongly I felt about that stupid question or statement. But I'm trying to keep this podcast PG, so... Anyway, that's 35 minutes. That's kind of like just a broad overview of what happened. Basically, I'll give you what my thoughts are. The doctors were all at the hospital, the neurologist and the nurses and the doctors that I saw when I was hospitalized here a couple of months ago. They couldn't believe that I had gone so long and I've not been diagnosed, and I'm not in worse shape. Well, I am, but not like I should be, because without being treated for MS for all of this time, I should basically be in like a quadriplegic in a wheelchair, you know? And I chalk it up to the supplements I've been taking. And because they were geared towards treating or keeping my spine healthy because of what I thought was a spinal injury to my neck in high school, I inadvertently was treating the MS. And some of the supplements and things that I've been doing over the years are things that only here recently in the past 5 years or so, they've actually started treating MS patients with. So I have been for decades treating my MS without realizing it. And when they told me to stop taking that and stop doing that stuff after my bicep surgery, that allowed the MS to get a foothold. And of course, it was a stressful situation, you know. Plus, I was moving. That's a stressful situation, which is a trigger for MS in itself. And then I didn't have the supplements in me anymore. And that's what happened. I had not had an MS episode like that ever. I mean, there was the hypertensive thing, but that was really before I started all of the healthy, you know, living and supplements and all of that stuff. And even that wasn't that big a deal in the grand scheme of the MS, you know, sickness, illness, whatever. So my thought on the subject is that I accidentally kept the MS at bay. And when I stopped taking everything, that's when it got a hold of me, and it did some serious damage to me. I mean, I've been for months. I walk like a 90-year-old man now, and I use a cane. I can walk without it, like just here in the house, but that's only when I know I can. If I start to fall over, I can put my hand on a wall, that kind of thing. And I force myself to walk without the cane. Well, not force I don't want to walk with the cane anyway, but I intentionally walk without the cane to try and see if I can retrain my nerves and my muscles to get me walking the right way. But anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic. This is just a general overview of my MS story. Let me read what I got here in my description. How and why I lived with MS for 30 years, undiagnosed, till lost the ability to walk in November. Okay, well, I guess I covered everything. So in this podcast, what I want to do is I'm going to talk about the things I was doing that I believe was holding off the MS. And one thing is, when I was in the hospital, just before I went to, I was in rehab, and I wasn't making very much progress. This was for first maybe 3 to 5 days I was in there. And actually, it was when I was in the nursing home. I ordered one of my supplements, the biggie. And I'll tell you all what it is. It's acetylcarnitine. It's actually acetyl L-carnitine, but acetylcarnitine. And I ordered that when I was in the nursing home, and it arrived just before I went to the rehab. And then the doctor had to approve it. You had to go to the pharmacy, you know, and all that stuff. So it took a couple of days. Well, during that, I had gotten to where my leg, I was able to use it, but I wasn't really getting better very well. In the bottom of my foot felt like it was like I had taken and you know, those big thick sponges you use to wash your car with. It was like I had one attached to the bottom of my foot. So when I would try to walk, I had almost no sensation of the floor at all. And it was very disconcerting. It made it hard for me to correctly walk, because you have no, you know, you go put your foot down, you have no idea when you're actually on the floor. I mean, if you've had those kinds of sensations, you know what I'm talking about. So when I started taking the acetylcarnitine, the next day it went away, completely gone. And from that day on, every single day, I was making leaps and bounds in how much better I was getting. And I'll go into detail in another video why all that happened. So anyway, I guess I'll wrap it up there. I want to start, if you have a story, if you want to come on here and I mean, this is a podcast. This isn't just me yapping about my MS. I'm going to yap about my MS too, but I want to see if I can get some people who have, and to come on here and tell their own MS stories, as in an interview environment, and share what you have done that has helped your MS, any kind of natural supplements you've been using in that have helped you out, that kind of thing. Just general talk about MS and other illnesses. The reason that I was going to Florida to get my sister and my mother is that my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer almost a year ago now. And I was moving her up here because the landlord she had down there like doubled her rent. She couldn't afford it on Social Security. And that my sister and her lived together, and my sister was diagnosed with MS back in 2006. So I was going to move the two of them up here where it's much more affordable to live. And then I was going to buy a motorhome and travel the country. And that didn't work out. So now I am also in here, and we're all kind of together, offsetting each other's issues and that kind of thing, and taking care of each other. So anyway, with everything that's happened, this podcast is going to be about, like I said, destination life, the things people are doing to battle against their illnesses. I mean, obviously at first it's going to focus on MS, unless somebody comes to me right away with something else, Parkinson's or whatever. But, I want to talk about all of it, and the treatments and the new things coming out that are helping people and that kind of thing, and see if we can, because I'm living proof that supplements can make a difference. I should have been dead a long time ago with MS without treating it at all. I should be hospitalized in a nursing home at least. I'm living proof. I mean, look at the picture I put up there. That was me a year ago. Well, what is it? No, a year and a half ago. A year and a half ago, that was me. And I mean, I've lifted weights and been in incredible shape with MS. And as an old man, I mean, I'm 52 in that picture. I'm 53 now. I just turned 53 a week ago. So I plan to get back into that kind of shape. But right now I've just moved, and my Bowflex is sitting in the garage. The garage is packed with boxes. Once I get all that cleared out, I'll set it back up and I'll get back into shape. And maybe I'll do a little bunch of videos on getting in shape with me so that y'all can follow along. I mean, I guess 60 pounds to lose. It should take me, I mean, if I'm able to get right at it and go hard at it, probably 6 months to lose that weight. So 6 to 8 months tops, So y'all can lose. If y'all having problems, you can get into shape, get healthy with me. Anyway, I'm rambling on at this point. We're at 43 minutes. So if you want to, you can leave a comment down below and I will contact you. Like, leave me your email, or if you go into About on my channel page, there's an option there to send me a message. That's like a PM. A lot of people don't realize you can do that on YouTube, but you have to go into the About and then send me a message. But you can also, I think you can get my email there too. I should have it turned on. But in any case, I'll tell you my email address. If I can find my mouse, where is it? Oh, there it is. I know what it is, but I just want to make sure I read it so I got it perfect, because I just created this page. Of course, it's not there. innatespirit@gmail.com, and that's INN, the number 8, spirit@gmail.com. Send me an email, tell me a little bit about your story, and we'll get you on the show to talk about your experience with your particular illness. And I appreciate y'all coming by and watching this whole 44-minute video now. And until next time, y'all take it easy.